Okay, hopefully everybody can see us. Great to see you all. As you can see, it's live. We've got a live stream special this week. As I've mentioned, Paul Hederer, the game designer for 1916 Prelude to Blitzkrieg, that's going to be published by VUCA Simulations, has agreed to hang out with us for an hour. And I just want to go very quickly through the people that are here already. Great to see you. Crispy Galactic, great to see you, Telemachus. Great to see you, Harold Bosma. Great to see you, Hissy Cat, Meandering Mike as well. And off we go. I'm just going to say thank you so much, Paul Hederer, for agreeing to show up on our show. Especially, like I said, finding out that an hour after this show ends, you're going to be doing an event at an online convention, which is pretty amazing. That you're going to fit all this in. And like I said, we're primarily just super excited to find out more about you and about your games. So, and I've got a bunch of questions here. Oh, good morning, Charles Vittoria. Wonderful to see you. So here we are. Off we go. Show us what you want to.
Okay.
And and like I said, we've got more than you've showed you the questions that Harold Bosma, just that one viewer, for goodness sakes, 16 questions. Like I was saying, if all else fails, we'll just go and use his 16 questions and fill up the hour. So, all right. So,
well, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. And I know you had to be a little bit flexible with me. We had a lot going on, and we had to postpone a couple of times. But now we're here, and I'm really glad. Thank you for the opportunity. What I'll do is, I guess I'll start with a couple of the general questions that were asked. Because mostly I think when we do these interviews, or when we do an interview, we don't tend to talk about ourselves very much. And then sometimes people are very curious about how you ended up being where you were. And I've even had people tell me, oh, I didn't have any idea you were even an American, because you live in Switzerland and you have a German name and all of this. But I am an American. I've been living in Europe for about 20 years now. I came over the first time when I was about 18 or 19. I was in the military. So I spent 22 years in the Air Force. So one of the questions was, what is your profession? And I would really say my profession was military. So I spent 22 years in the military, and then I spent 10 years afterwards working for the government. And about 2015, for family reasons, I decided to come to Switzerland so our family could be together. At that time, I was working near Frankfurt, and my wife was near Basel, which is about 2 hours away. And we said, hey, we really don't want to do this anymore. So I came down here, and now I'm working as an educator, and say how would you say it? Like a business language consultant and educator, which I really enjoy. I like it very, very much. I'm working the home office 100% 4 years after Corona. And that's something I never saw myself ever doing, because before I was on the road 4 days a week. I commuted every morning, just like every other person, get up, leave at 6 in the morning. And I will say one of the advantages has been is in between the time where I'm not online with clients, I can work on my game, or I can work on some aspect of something. So that's been a positive. How about if I put it that way?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I'll look at when did you start gaming? That's also a good question. So I started gaming in 1976. One of my first games was Tobruk, which I bought in a Walgreens. That may not mean much to other than the Americans, but what that means is that this was a time when you could actually find war games like in bookstores, and Walgreens is a drugstore, not a pharmacy, but a drugstore. And I saw it. We were traveling, and I went in with my mom and dad, and we were looking around, and I saw this thing on the shelf, and I thought, oh, I wonder what that is. And it was Tobruk. And so I bought it, and that was my first game. That's a pretty tough place to start, isn't it? But it was really cool. And then my brother and I bought the Blue and the Gray quad later that year when we were on vacation, because we're both interested in the Civil War, and he and I played that together. So since 76, and then I took a break. I went to university, and I got married, and everything else, and I took a break for a while, and I came back into gaming about 2010 again. So that's 15, almost 15 years ago.
Mm.
Yeah. Good. Let's see. I was kind of looking. I wrote it down here because they were such good questions.
I know. I was looking. You're right. I was looking at some of them. And I was like, "Holy smokes! Did Harold Bosma ever come up with some insightful ones?"
Yeah, and I won't go through every single one because I understand that probably your guys want to talk about the game, of course. But there are. So, what is your favorite war game, or what are your favorite war games? That's a very interesting question. It probably surprises people, or it may, because they're not World War I titles. I really like Washington's War very much. I think that Herman is a genius, or a near genius for sure. Most of his games are superior. I really enjoy the aspects that he shows. I like Napoleon's Triumph very much. I know that's kind of a non-standard title, and a lot of war gamers find the game a bit uncomfortable to play. It's only, I think, maybe 8 or 10 pages of rules, but it's very, very difficult to master. It's like chess and war games mixed together. It's kind of interesting.
I'm sorry if I'm interjecting here. Is there any commonality that you see between the games that you really like? Is there
maybe I would say they're a little bit more non-standard, and neither one of them is hex and counter. They're both area movement or area type control games. Of course, Herman's game is really card driven. And so that's a little bit different. I mean, I really like hex and counter war games too. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I would assume so.
Yeah, those are the two that really stick in my mind. And I really like Great Campaigns of the American Civil War, really a lot.
Okay.
And I'd say those three are probably my most favorite, really. And for no commonality other than I think they're all three great games. They're fun to play, and I really like it very much. Someone asked, this one is a good one because now we can kind of segue into the game. Okay. Someone asked about how did you get interested in this topic? And I would say really from when I first started gaming, I think it was 77 or 78, Great War in the East came out by SPI. And at that time, there weren't a lot of World War I topics. I never had played the game 1914 by Avalon Hill or something. I mean, that came out in like 68 or something. And so that was a little bit before my time. But SPI's Great War in the East really caught my imagination. I really liked it. There's the game Tannenberg, which was kind of the precursor for it. That's the fifth wheel. And I really like the games a lot. They're very simple. They're not perfect, but especially for the time and the fact that there were like hardly any World War I East Front games, all of a sudden there were 5 of them.
Okay.
One of the things that always kind of intrigued me a little bit was with the Brusilov Offensive, which was one of the topics. They always talked about Romania, and they always talked about yeah, and I always wondered a little bit. I remember when I played it, I had thought, oh, I wonder why there was no game on Romania. And so this was kind of a germ or a seed that was planted maybe, I don't know, 20, 30 years before I even really undertook to maybe try to make a game. It's an interesting topic. It's one that hasn't been done a lot. It's a unique campaign.
Certainly not the way you're doing it, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, because there is the one in the
closest, let's be honest, the closest that would come to it, and like I said, you're taking a different route, would be Der Weltkrieg. That's this closest you're going to get to yours. Everyone else is in another level of abstraction, or yeah.
Yep. No,
that's operational feel to it. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a really good. It's a really good point. And the scale of the game is 10 kilometers per hex, so it is the same as Nacht Paris, and that was just that was kind of an interesting coincidence because as we kind of chatted about before we came on the air, was the game had originally started using the 1914 series by Mike Resch and GMT, and this was back when Twilight in the East was the only game that had been published, and so I really kind of became enamored with this game system. I knew it partially from the games of David Bolt, which are older but are similar. And so I had played Cossacks before, and I
Wow,
was
you have, eh? Wow.
yeah. Well, Cossacks goes. It's a pretty small
I've got
game.
it upstairs. It's one of my little holy grail games to
Yeah.
eventually play at some point. But when I saw the different levels of rail, I went, oh my goodness gracious me.
Yeah, it's definitely a simulation, and David really infused it with a lot of information, and he had done has done really a lot of research as well. And so this is kind of what got me started along this line with these series of games. And I had worked on it, and I'd been interested in it, and I was able to, when I was living in Germany, when I was working near Frankfurt, I was able to get a copy of the Romanian official history, and then I got a copy of the Bulgarian official history, the two books that cover the campaign in Romania. And it was intriguing to me because what I found that was very interesting, because I also studied operational military history in school,
Wow.
was a lot of the topics are really hard to research because of the destruction of the German military archives. They were almost completely destroyed in 45. And if you're trying to write something on the German army or on one of the campaigns that the German army was involved in, there's just these huge holes in it. And what intrigued me about Romania was the amount of material that was available, and there is just an
Wow.
avalanche. It's really interesting, and I see you have I think Tori's book behind you there
Well,
on your.
because you suggested it. Because you suggested it. Yes.
And what's kind of interesting too is there's been two really, really good volumes published on the campaign in the last, I think, last 10 years, which is again kind of interesting because when you think about the First World War, yes, I think the interest in it has picked up a bit, and it definitely in wargaming is definitely a much more
Well,
popular.
as you know, with the centenary, I mean,
Sure.
yeah.
Yep. But what I found intriguing was that there were two really good books written on the campaign. I mean, excellent books, both of them within the last 10 years or so. And I found this very interesting. And I think this helped boost also my interest and kind of give me the push to say, okay, let's try to do this. And the research took a long time. I would really say the research was one of the things that has taken 10 years because it has been really almost 10 years. But one of the questions that was asked was, how long have you been working on this? And I did want to talk a little bit about that. It has been about 10 years, but in that 10 years, it was really a little bit off and on. I moved twice in 10 years. I also started a completely new career. I also moved from one country to the next. So there was a lot going on. So
But you must have still had it churning. Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of percolating in the back of your head, that's for sure. But when you've got to move and everything and find a new job and everything, then obviously for months and months, then, it's something maybe you could work on a Saturday or when you have a little bit of time, but not in a focused manner, like really in let's say the last 2 years or so, when I really dug back into it and had decided, okay, let's get this done. And there was also another aspect to that because one of the questions was, and this is also a really, really good question, was what were the primary sources that the information came from? And we talked a little bit about the Romanian official history, the Bulgarian official history, the Austro-Hungarian official history, which is back here somewhere behind us, which I had before, the German official history, and then more importantly, the Russian archives, a lot of the Russian archives were made available. And there were some big, huge holes in the research, and the Russian army played a huge, huge part in the campaign. And so there were huge holes that I had to kind of extrapolate because there was no published list of, for example, of all the reinforcements that came and how they arrived and when they came and where they came from. But getting into the archival documents, I was able to really get that all out of there. And for example, one of the things that I found was all the rail order moves for the entire war you can search. So you can look at them, and I OCR'd them. So I did the optical character recognition, I think it is. And then what I could do was I could search them, and I could look for different units. So then I would search
Oh
from.
my gosh, must have went really a lot quicker after that. Yeah.
Yeah, it did. It's like industrial level research, and so I just put in August until August 1916 until January 1917, and then I was able to search, and I could see exactly when all the units had arrived. And if anybody ever wanted to write a really cool book or do some cool research, you could literally see where all the Russian units were every day of the war, because those rail movement orders are in there from the beginning of the war until the end. But that takes a lot of time. It really takes a lot of time.
Patterns too, you probably could see over time and see, like glean some information of what's been going on just based on, yeah, oh my.
Yeah, sure, because every once in a while, some of these rail orders will have an explanatory note attached to them, and one of the ones for this area was the Russian authorities made a comment that, okay, we're really having a hard time supplying the Danube Army, which is already in Romania, and its rail line for communications is this, and it can only handle this many rail cars per day. And we really need to be careful about what we're sending down there, because we're really limited on our supply. Things like that for a game designer are like pure gold. I mean, you look at them and you say, okay, now I understand what's going on.
Okay, now I'm going to throw in a little side bit here because you're going on with the trains. How do the trucks connect the dots with this? Because I know they're, like, as you know, logistics is a unbelievable nightmare in World War I. Getting stuff from just to the railhead, and then from the railhead to the actual troops. And I know that you've mentioned several times that truck movement was a big thing with part of the Romanian campaign. So, like, how was that in conjunction with the rail? Was there any connection with it, with the rail,
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good point. Because first, when the Romanians went over the Carpathians, should I?
You do whatever you want, Paul. You do whatever you want.
Put up the one map of kind of.
Do I have to do it again, or have you got access?
I think I'm okay.
Okay, you do whatever you want.
Yeah, let's take a look, and then we'll make sure it looks okay. Okay, can you?
Yep.
There we go. Okay, so kind of this is the actual game map, and then what I did is I superimposed just some general idea of where everybody was going. I realize it's really a 25,000-foot view of the battlefield, but this is the campaign area. It's a very, very big area. It's about 45,000 square kilometers, so it's huge. And so when the Romanians initially went, the plan was they wanted to go over the Carpathians here, and they wanted to advance to here, and then there's a major rail line that runs through here, and then they wanted to pivot this way and then head towards Budapest. So this was called Plan Z, and this was their war plan that they wanted to do. So to get over these mountains here, there's really only a major rail line here and a major rail line here. And they advanced in this area, and they captured this city here, Kronstadt, here. And they were able to get their rail service running up into this area. But here in this area, they never captured this city. And on this front, on this axis, the Central Powers blew up a huge viaduct in this area here, and that just stopped them cold. And the fact that they couldn't get a rail line running this direction was one reason why they also used trucks. In this area here, they put together a special truck column to. Oh, you can't see you can't see my cursor. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So I can see it, but you guys can't. Is it? Can you see it over here now? Is this good?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. The wonders of technology. Okay. All right, guys. Sorry. Okay. So on this axis, they didn't have a rail line because the Central Powers blew up a big viaduct. And so this would take about 2 months to repair. That's also in the game as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's really simple, and it's just a matter of when you capture it, then you basically 2 months later, then you could use it if the Romanians still hold it. I'd put it that way.
Okay.
On this front here, they formed a special truck unit that
Okay.
carried ammunition over the mountains from here to here because there's no rail line here. So they didn't have any way of really moving this heavy ammunition. So the Romanians used trucks here.
Do you
And
think, like, from what you know, how innovative were the Romanians using trucks, or like,
not
it's like they
so
had to do it? Like, did they were they pushing the boat out, pardon the pun, like that way with trucks more so than other ones because they had to rely on them? Do you know of that, or?
no, I'd say actually, Chris, they were probably a little bit behind.
Okay.
And so when they initially put the trucks in there, they just basically distributed them evenly.
Okay.
There were 2 truck columns here, 2 here, 2 here, and 2 here, and then there was I think 1 here in reserve, and then this third army down here in the south didn't get any trucks at all. They had, I think,
They,
10 trucks.
from what I know, they do. The Romanians get better over time, correct? Like
They
like
did,
they
and
start to clue in about okay, we weren't so prepared or so experienced as what we thought. Okay.
sure, and the French advisors they had with them also played a really big
Oh,
part
I
in
didn't
it.
know they had any. Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
there was a whole French military mission down here, and General Berthelot, his name is
Okay.
Berthelot. He's known as the savior of Romania, kind of
Oh,
interesting moniker. Not everybody can be called that. He was down here, and he basically became the de facto chief of staff starting in, I think it was early October,
wow.
because the king lost confidence in the general staff at that time, and so he basically fired these guys.
Okay.
This French general in charge, and he was in charge for about a month or two, and then they brought in actually was the commander of the Fourth Army, a guy named Prezan, became the chief of staff after that. But you're right, you make a good observation, and that the Romanians did get better. Kind of an example with the trucks is they had distributed them very, very evenly. And then, under the advice of the French in October, they withdrew all the trucks and then formed them in one big unit that they could delegate out or give out as they needed. So they had done some advancement. The Russians actually used quite a few trucks, and up in
Okay.
this area, yeah, they did. They actually had really quite a few vehicles, and they used them quite extensively, and you can see that looking through their records.
Because I'll be honest with you, Paul. Like, I'm not like the most experienced with World War I gaming, but
Mhm.
I think your game is the first time I've ever actually even heard of trucks being represented in.
Mike Resch has them in his game in the
Okay, thanks.
1914 game. Yeah, because they were so critical to the right flank movement in 1914.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Yeah, for the Germans, they were really critical. So he's got them in there as well. But there were a lot more trucks here in Romania for the Germans, especially. They just flooded this area with truck columns. They had cavalry truck columns, heavy truck columns, and then
Wow.
almost every one of the divisions on the Central Power side had a truck column also.
Holy cow! This is all this stuff I'm going to have to learn about. Wow.
Yeah, it's and the big thing with the trucks and what I wanted to try to show in the game is how they exponentially increase the supply capacity, because number one, they're about 3 times as fast as a horse drawn wagon. And the big thing is that they can carry quite a lot as
I
well.
was going to say, and also the lift capacity must be just dramatically much
Yeah.
better.
Yep. So it is exponentially higher, and the truck columns in the game represent each counter represents 2 truck columns. And I believe the lift capacity is I'm trying to remember if I did 50 or 100, so I don't want to sound stupid
Okay.
here, but it's one of those things you don't think about very often. But they basically they were using the Germans especially were using it to bridge these gaps up here after the Romanians had destroyed some of these rail lines, and they were advancing back down this direction to make their counteroffensive. They used the truck columns to bridge the gaps in the rail. And
Okay.
yeah,
So
so
I don't know if you subscribe to this, but I heard somebody mention this to me a few weeks ago about saying about game design. When going to design a game, try to design a game something that you want to teach rather than something you would want to play. Like I said, I don't know if you agree with that, but if you do or whatever, I'm wondering, like, what do you think you wanted to teach or bring across in your game? Like,
yeah, it's a good question.
and why, therefore, do you think, let's say, the mechanisms and the rules that you're using are probably the best way to portray what you're trying to bring out?
Okay, yeah, it's a
Versus
really
like area movement or something like that. Like you've decided to go the route you have.
yeah. Well, I mean, there's a fairly big focus on logistics, and it's not what in the game we call general supply. General supply is like beans and basically the everyday items that would keep an army alive. That is, I would say, generalized a lot because it's not the big focus of the game.
Okay.
Of course, we have the restrictions in there that you can't operate. You can't operate 400 kilometers from a railhead. It just doesn't work. But we've really looked at this and we said, okay, we didn't want to make this the focus. So the focus is really on ammunition supply because this was really what was the heaviest to move and really what would slow down operations. And one of the observations I would make was that many of the games, you see these mechanisms put into the games to try to slow down and to, I would say, maybe emulate the fact that when these First World War armies they moved forward, they really had a lot of supply problems. And basically, anytime they got more than maybe say 60 kilometers from the railhead, they started really running into problems because they had to run relays of these horse-drawn supply. And if the guys were moving at all, the problem is that these relays, as you're marching forward, the relays start falling farther and farther and farther behind. And that's another thing with trucks. I mean, trucks that can travel 100, 120 kilometers a day can make a couple of these round trips and never fall behind, as opposed to, let's say horse-drawn, which maybe can make 30 to 35 kilometers a day. That's 15 kilometers when you look at making your loop there. So what we really want to show is that kind of the atrophy that happens when you move away from these rail lines. And we didn't want to make it really too general. We wanted to make it more exact so people could understand what was going on. So the units can march forward with the ammunition they have in their limbers and within the batteries and all this other stuff. So they can fight, and they can fight beyond this range, the rail line. But the thing is then it starts really slowing down because you have to replenish this ammunition. And this was really the problem. And it's if any of your guests or you have read about the Western Front, this was even a problem on the small scale of the offensives in the West, because they chewed up the ground so much that the artillery, they couldn't move it forward because it would take them 9 hours to move a kilometer, and they would kill half the horses in the horse teams. They would move forward, then they couldn't move any ammo forward, and so they would have to wait for another week for them to move all the stuff forward, and then they would kind of leapfrog forward. And on an operational scale, it's kind of the same idea, even if you're dealing with distances of 50 or 60 kilometers.
Mhm.
And this, and also the ammunition supply was not limitless. I've heard some people say, well, in the First World War, you see these images. I think there's a real famous Getty image of all the used brass casings there, that are stacked like, 4 meters tall.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that really wasn't the case. And that was another thing I would say was a big evolution in the design, was getting into. So I also went to the German military archives in Freiburg, and one of the really pieces of luck that I had was that all of the ammunition supply delivery for the entire war is in there.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah, for every army. So you can see how many shells they used and how many they delivered every month.
That must have been a jaw dropper of a numbers to see those. You must have. I mean, I remember looking at the first day of Verdun, and it was just like 9-hour bombardment, and you're just like over 1 million shells, like no problem.
Yeah, it wasn't quite what I expected. So I was really a little bit not shocked, but it wasn't what I thought I would see. It was. I'm trying to look here because it was one of the things I didn't look at for to show an example, because somebody asked about it. But it showed it, but they were much lower than I thought they would be. And the Bulgarians, if you read Tori's book or you read Barrett's book, he talks a lot about how the offensive in the south with the Bulgarians was on pause for almost a month because the Bulgarians didn't have enough ammunition. And they basically begged the Germans to give them an emergency ration, and they sent, I think it was 20,000 shells or something they sent in early October, and they got them delivered there. But what really surprised me was the lack of ammunition on both sides, until on the Central Power side, until later in the campaign, starting really in the mid to late October when they really started to get rolling. Then in game terms, then you're looking at 24 or 25 ammo points every strategic phase, which is every 3 days, or every 3 turns, which is 1 week. Before that, it's like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. And with the Russians, it's the same. So I wanted to show that one of the reasons why the operations evolved and occurred the way they did was not for any external factors other than there just wasn't enough ammunition and they needed to move it forward. So I wanted the players to experience this and understand, in First World War terms, at least on the Eastern Front, in a sector where the rail lines are not well developed, why this occurred. Because when we play tested the game and we didn't use any ammunition at all, the Bulgarians just rolled right over the top of the Romanians. And we really talked a lot about this. Andrea Brusati was one of the first play testers, a really good game designer, and on the First World War, and he really has helped a lot. And he played the Romanians, or he played the Bulgarians, and I played the Romanians, and he just rolled right over the top of me. And we talked a lot about this, that there was something missing from the game, obviously, that didn't break what was going on. There needed to be something in this.
Is his is his game the same scale as yours?
You mean the game that he
Caporetto one?
The one that he's publishing, that I think is coming out sometime soon, is not. I believe it's about 2 or 3, 4 kilometers per hex.
Oh my goodness!
But the game that he was working on, which he's also contemplating using the Knock Paris system for, which has been sitting on the shelf now for many years, is I think it's 4 or 5 kilometers per hex. It's a little bit.
Oh, holy moly! That's Because even like when you said yours is 10 kilometers per hex, I was like, okay, that's half of a Krieg. So you're in a different realm of thinking about things. So how complicated would you say your game's going to be when it comes out and people are actually going to sit and pop it on the table and play it? Like, I mean, it to me sounds like it's got enough meat, like enough detail in there that it's going to take me a while to probably digest. However, and for replayability, though, seems pretty darn enormous if there's going to be enough complexity where it's like, no, it's going to take me a while to master this game, to really start getting into it. And maybe we may not play, let's say, a campaign game twice or whatever, but if we play a campaign game, we're going to actually, in a weird way, learn the way the Romanians are learning, in the sense that we'll start probably not making the best moves, because we're still learning the rules and all the mechanisms. But as we get later on into the campaign, we should be really starting to click good.
Okay, yeah,
and we know one thing, and everybody has seen this as well. I've never seen it in my life. The amount of times you mentioned playtest, it's fantastic to see. It's just like incredible. Like, so many times I'm looking at the forum posts and you're like, yeah, but we got to do a little bit more playtest, a little bit more. I'm like, wow, this is spectacular to see. So from your playtesting, what have people been saying? I mean, like, what levels are you getting for your playtesters? Are they always like high level gamers, or are you like?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. I would say no, they're varied. So Federico, so I'm really, really super lucky that I actually just stumbled across two playtesters here locally. And yes, we do have playtesters in Switzerland, and we actually do have war gamers in Switzerland. I've also been asked that question before too. I think we actually have quite a few war gamers in Switzerland. They're just kind of back in the woodwork. It's kind of interesting. You're always finding one. You're always, you look on Board Game Geek and you'll see somebody post about something. You'll say, hey, that guy's in Zurich, or hey, that guy's in Bern, or whatever. And so we have two local playtesters here. And one guy is a very inexperienced gamer. He's more of a Euro gamer who's making his. And that's Federico. And then the other guy is Philip. He's a more veteran war gamer, but definitely a younger guy. And I would say he's newer, but he's good. They're both really good players, and they both are very diligent.
It just must be so nice that you're getting different perspectives from gaming backgrounds. I mean, rather than just the same. Yep.
No. We really wanted, and we're quite excited about having somebody play who was more of a Euro gamer, and then he was very excited about Nach Paris, and then he saw that we were making a game and he wanted to get involved. And he's also just a super great player, and he's also a really good proofreader, and he's been really good at bouncing rules off of. So
nice.
I really love it that if I write something and I want to see, if his head's going to explode, I can send him a short thing and say, hey, on WhatsApp, read this and tell me what you think. And then he'll either say, okay, yeah, I got it. It's no problem at all. It seems very clear. Or I don't really understand what this is or what you're trying to explain. Mostly it's, yeah, I got it. This looks good. When we played in April, we played 2 games and we played for 2 days. And then Lionel Martinez, who is the developer, and I played into the next day as well. The feedback was really positive, and it was, this is fun. It's easy to understand.
Oh, good.
But hard to master.
Excellent.
Because there's so many aspects of it about the command and control and the unit integrity and the supply, and really looking at all the aspects of what all mixes together. So there's a lot of ramifications to what you do. I'll give you just a short example. So you have the headquarters units, and then we don't track the how would I say, the subordination like in the 1914 games. We don't have these little army charts and everything, which is a good idea. It's a cool idea. It's just a lot of overhead. And so we decided we wanted to try to do it in a different way. And so we just do it basically on the map. And we allow you to assign your units the way that you want to. And there's not ranges on them as far as command and control, but there's ranges on them for supplying the ammunition and for the general supply. So what we always caution is, yeah, if you want to put a core on a front of 200 kilometers, you can. But the problem is that because of unit integrity, if you don't subordinate other units, you can't move other units into the line, because that's not the way the military works. And that's really a big aspect of the game, is that when you're trying to launch an offensive and maybe you've got your cores like this on a 2 or 3 hex front, they can get crowded really, really fast. And you need to think about your subordination. You need to think about the supply. You need to think about the ammunition. And you need to think about what you're doing, because an illegal move is to move a non-subordinated unit into the realm of, let's say, another core. That doesn't work. You can't do it. It's not allowed. And this is a little bit for any of you guys who play, I think it's BCS. It's this, they have this blob concept, which is actually a pretty cool concept. And it's very similar to that. What they're basically saying is when a unit is operating in military terms, another unit just doesn't move through the middle of it. It's common sense, but it's hard to show in games. It's really a little bit difficult. And I think it's unique. And I think BCS really deserves a hat tip for this, because it's something they don't show very often. We don't usually say, oh, wait a minute, this guy's not attached to the 13th Infantry or the Army Corps, so I can't move this guy in there. We don't show this in games very often, but in real life, it's a big issue. It's for logistics, for command and control. It's the whole thing of, what do you do when a corps marches all across your line of supply? It causes all kinds of problems.
So you would say that to play this effectively, you're probably going to have to, the player will have to do some planning for
yeah,
amount of time beforehand.
absolutely. And that's
Just
another
not
thing.
just go straight in and be a reactor. In other
Exactly.
words.
And that's one of the things that you asked what we wanted to show. The other thing is trying to erase a little bit this fantasy that in the First World War, an army could just lurch into offensives on a one-day notice. Okay, people look at 1914 and they say, well, you had these big armies swirling around each other and doing it. But you really have to think about something. Yeah, and you have to think about one thing, and this was a question that came up where somebody said, what were the differences and what were the transitions you needed to make from showing fighting in the West to fighting in the East? I would rather say the transition was fighting from 1914 to fighting to the end of 1916. And that's the real big difference. This fighting that happened in 1914 happened to some degree in 1915 on the Eastern Front, but not really the same way. And that was one of the comments I've seen people make on Board Game Geek and also on Facebook is I think there's been a little bit of concern that we're moving away from this Nach Paris, baseline.
Okay.
But we've had to. And that was one of the first things when
Osman mentions, exactly, yes. How could the Nach Paris system fit your thing if it's a Western front based? Yes, excellent.
Yeah, so it doesn't fit exactly, but Bertrand was aware of that, and he and I talked, the three of us with Lionel Martinez as well, back and forth when we first made the overture to use his system, because the first thing we did was ask him.
Okay.
Well, I talked with Patrick, and then we talked with Bertrand because we wanted absolutely to have his approval. It's his system.
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah, and it's his baby, so we wanted to make sure that it was okay. And one of the first discussions we had, and one of the first things I remember he told me was I think you're going to have to make a lot of changes. And it's really true. And it's not because of any inherent weakness in Nach Paris. Absolutely not. It's just a universe away from these maneuvering 1914 armies that fought in a way that nobody fought in the rest of the war. I mean, the losses were catastrophic. I mean, just catastrophic. If you look at the loss levels in 1914, it's like this tall on the scale. And then in 1915, it drops down like this, and then it's here, and then it goes back up into 1918 again. But what's interesting is I think there's a general idea, because we have our perceptions of how things happen and about the war was, okay, yes, casualties were high. You have Verdun, you have the Somme. Yeah, you've got all of this going on. You've got Ypres, Chemin de Dôme, all this stuff. But the thing is a lot of these battles were, the reason why the losses piled up as much as they did is because they lasted for 6 or
I was
10
going
years.
to say, yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And there was a French artillery general that wrote a really, really interesting study after the war, and it was published in the Artillery Journal, I think in 1920. And it was called, what is it? The Murderous Power of Artillery, I believe was the name of the article. But what he actually argues is that the lethality of artillery actually fell during the war. And he showed, using
Whoa.
those statistics, that the amount of shells that had to be fired to kill every soldier actually went up as the war went on.
Yes. I can remember Richard Faulkner doing a lecture on trench warfare, and I think they predicted it was something like 500 pounds of artillery shell was needed per yard of trench by a certain point in the war. And I mean, that's just like obscene. A number you can't even understand. Look, not to say that we're running out of time, but I want to make sure we do look at a couple of beautiful things. I want to look at your counters, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, let's.
One thing about your counters, Paul, which knocks me sideways, is the fact that there is an unbelievable amount of information on those counters, yet they do not look confusing to me. And I don't even know what the heck I'm looking at, to be honest with you, because I don't know the system. But every time I've looked at your counters, I'm like, do I have to add the stage again? Yep.
Yeah.
So every time I've looked at your counters, I'm absolutely astounded that I'm like, there's an awful lot of information, and the people that know me, I like to. That's how I almost do my version of information popping on. So yeah, I'd love to take a look at those counters. And then, like I said, I've got a couple of side questions. Like I said, I know that you're very interested in not pure simulation, but you certainly do want to simulate lots of parts of the Romanian conflict, especially like you were saying at one point, you were trying to figure out how to portray the fact that, 1 minute, one part of the army was going north and then it was going back down south and back north. Like, how do you get that? And it was like, okay, it doesn't seem to be potentially, the Romanians are doing maybe a bit better than historically, and it's like, well, how are we supposed to, affect that? So on that side bits, while we're looking at your beautiful counters, like I was saying, I mentioned before the show started, I would like to know if there are possibilities, for example, maybe not in the game the way you're going to have it now, but maybe later on as a supplement. Is there a possibility, for example, that as the Romanian player can say, no, I want to attack the Russians and go after Bessarabia? Or no, I'm going to actually do what the other Allied powers wanted me to do at the very beginning of the war, and that's to go south and attack the Bulgarians and not be greedy. That type of stuff.
Yeah, so it's a really, really good question. And one of the things would be that I think there would be a room to make a version where the Romanian army doesn't expand as much as it did. Because this was a huge problem for them, because they had 5 army corps with basically 2 active and 1 reserve division. And then they expanded from 15 divisions to 23. And it caused a huge problem. And I think that would be one cool variant is say, okay, they stick with the original 15 or 18 divisions.
As well as, I know that, I don't know if you were going to be doing that, but I was talking with Meandering Mike yesterday, and he was saying that VUCA Simulations seems to like to do this with a lot of their games, because I only saw it with the Knock Paris game, was those A4 tutorial type scenario things. And I was like, wouldn't that, now that you just mentioned about, those type of things, it's like, maybe that would be an interesting little thing, having like an A4 size scenario of, oh, you want to attack the Russians? Go ahead. We don't have to do a full-on whatever. Here's here's a little scenario for you. Anyways.
Yeah, I think the game lends itself to a lot of what ifs, and one of them would be, as you said, attacking Bulgaria, because that was really, and there was a preliminary plan to attack Bulgaria too. They did have a war plan for this, but they they followed their political incentives, and they really wanted to try to liberate this population in Transylvania.
Yeah.
Would you like me to just quickly talk about?
You do anything you want, but like I said, I seriously just wanted to look at your counters, because it's just like I've said, I've seen counters with much less information than yours and are way more busy looking. It just to me seems like you spent some time fiddling around, moving things around on the counter, and go, no, this looks right. These are the contrasts I'm going to use, so on and so forth. Like I said, I don't know. I mean, I just know the NATO symbols. Other than that, I don't have a clue what I'm looking at. So, but yet again, they don't look. It doesn't look difficult to understand.
Yeah, and I'll make sure I get the cursor in the right place. There we go. Okay, so looking at this, this is the Russian 32nd Infantry Division. It belongs to this corps over here, the 11th Corps. And so, using Nakari system, these are the steps. This is exactly the same. This is the cab. This is combat ability rating, which are quite a bit higher than in Nakari. It's a 17, which is very high. 50 is the movement. There are no movement categories the same as in Nakari. That's why the boxes are gone. So people who are fans of the game will notice right away, hey, where did the black and green boxes go? They're not necessary because infantry, for example, has no category. These function bars down here at the bottom, like here on this unit here, this is for cavalry, even though this is because this is a bicycle unit.
Oh,
white is command. These dark green, this is Alpine. These are mountain troops.
And you were saying that. Sorry, you were saying that your friend was it Federico?
Federico, yeah, the
Eurogamer and he caught on to this relatively, but he had played Knock Paris before this, but he caught on pretty quick to. Like he was like, people have not been going back and forth to the rule book every 3 seconds to go, what the heck is the white one again? Okay.
No, not at all. We haven't had that at all.
Because let's be honest. I mean, we're getting to your game seems to is at a certain level where I don't need to be spending more time trying to figure out what the heck's going on with what I'm looking at, because I need to think about what the heck I want to do game wise. So good on you.
Well, we've tried to make the game components do most of the work, and this was
excellent.
This was really a huge thing for Lionel and I. We've gone through and been scrubbing every little element from the rules to the counters to the map to everything. And so what is different here is these are your combat factors here. So there's no ARF anymore. There's no artillery factor. There is on the heavy artillery, which is shown with this dark band here. So this is eliminated from these infantry type units, and it's incorporated into the overall strength of this. So this is different. And so this is your normal strength here. This is your augmented strength. This is if you spend two ammunition categories. I don't want to say points because you have an ammunition state. And this is your reduced factor here. So what you use is right on the counter, and you calculate it based on how you allocate your ammunition.
Okay.
And it was before that we made the players calculate it. And then after the playtest, we had this brainstorm where we were sitting on Sunday morning, and we said, hey, what if we put it all on the counter so you don't have to do any math at all? And this is what we came up with. So we moved the unit rating from over here to here. The rest of it's kind of the same. There's a few things that aren't on there. Again, getting rid of the ARF because we don't let units bombard each other like in Knock Paris, because that wasn't really standard procedure. They didn't really just sit away and bang away with their field guns at each other. And we didn't want the players to do that either, on the off chance that maybe they could inflict some type of loss. So now most of the punching power, or I should say all the artillery punching power is here in these heavy artillery units, which all sides have. But there is this augmented factor here. And you can see it's quite a bit. It's 5, it jumps up by 5. And so if you really go in an all-out effort and pour in a lot of ammo, you're looking at 66 factors here instead of 54. It really starts to add up.
Wow. Okay, so we got 5 minutes left, Paul. Let's try to jam in as much as we possibly can. My gosh, you must look and go, oh my gosh, I've come a long way from.
Yeah.
Where, I can remember reading. When was it that you were thinking about self-publishing? Like at one point, because I remember reading some of those things, and you're like considering, geez, I may do was that at a point where you were like, I just want to get?
Yeah, I just wanted to get it out, and I had some interest from some different game publishing companies, but some of them were a bit restrictive. So a lot of them, the initial conversations were like, well, can you make the map smaller, and can you cut down the number of counters? And
now looking back, though, now aren't you happy the way it's worked out?
Well, sure. And one of the questions somebody asked me was, how did I come in contact with VUCA? And that's a really good one.
This has been the Harold Bosma question show for sure, man. He's been fantastic.
Yeah, but it's a good question. So what I posted an update on Facebook in the Wargamers group, and I posted it, in about 15 or 20 minutes later, I got a message from Patrick, and he said,
wow.
He said, your game looks great.
Would wow. That must have felt, oh my gosh, that must have felt amazing.
Well, it was good. And the thing is with Patrick is that Patrick is a businessman. And so I will say this, that so I had my initial meeting with him. We talked, and I was very impressed by the way he's very professional. He loves games, but he's a businessman.
Yeah, I was going to say, he ain't no dummy. So it's not.
The conversation was really focused, and it wasn't just like, hey, I looked at your map and it looks really pretty, and I think I'd like to publish your game sometime. It was really hard questions. What do you want to do with this? What do you want to do with that? What do you think about this? What do you think about that?
Like we were saying, I could, like I was mentioning when you were saying that, okay, we've changed the game system. I could kind of feel that you were like in those things of like, okay, this is going to be, not a hard pill to swallow, but something that you had to like consider seriously about switching over. And it was like, that's,
Yeah. There's some interesting questions there. Somebody asked about a book as a kind of a starter. Actually, the book behind Chris there on his shelf, The Romanian Battlefront in World War I, it's a whole book, but you can get it on Kindle, and it's not very expensive as well. That's an excellent book. That is really readable and really good. And I don't plan on visiting Spiel in Essen. It's hard for me to get time off, and I would say that any time that I've got, probably we're going to try to spend playtesting. We're thinking about doing another in-person playtest in November with Patrick attending, either with or without his business partner. We'll see, but I'm not planning on going to Essen, unfortunately.
Well, when do you think? I don't know if VUCA does pre-order stuff, but they did, when do you think we would see?
They don't do pre-orders, so they just commit to publishing.
It'll just all of a sudden be okay.
Yeah, and Patrick has said if we can get it submitted by the end of this year, he'll publish it next year.
Wow.
That's what we're shooting for. So we've got the rule book is about 90% done. The last couple of weeks have been really busy for myself and Lionel, so we've kind of had to slow down. But we made tremendous progress in that. Basically, before the initial playtest in April, we had a collection of different sections of rules that we gave to the playtesters and then fleshed out for them as we needed. And now we've got almost an entire rule book. And so I would say where we came from September when we made the decision to switch to now has been amazing when you consider it's 9 months? 9 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, we're about to wrap it up, primarily because I know I want to give your poor voice a rest due to the fact that you're about to go and you're going to be in a convention in about an hour or so.
Yeah, that'll be fun. This was also fun, and I really want to thank you for
Goody, I'm really glad.
the opportunity. I think it's really unique what your show is doing and how you're following the war and expanding on it.
Well, like I said, I'm so, it's just been a wonderful thing to pop you on here. And it was just so interesting, like I said, that we had been following your game for quite a long time before you contacted us. And you know, like I said, your game is like this little pet game that's like our little favorite game that we've been following along in development. And all of a sudden, here you are, the designer for the game, and it's about to be released. Odds are next year. This is fantastic.
We're hoping next year, and I think the playtests have been going really, really well. And Lionel and I have been playing each week to hammer out some stuff, and we're really, really happy. Well, we're happy enough that we put everything down on paper, put it that way. And if anybody's designed a game, you'll understand that when you start putting stuff into your draft rule book, I don't see anything completely derailing us. I'll put it that way.
Okay. Oh, well, I just want to say yet again, thank you so very much for popping on. All the best fortune to you on all your endeavors, Paul. And everybody else, thank you so much for popping on. I'm about to hit the end stream, and great weekend to you and great week to everyone. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you
Very much, Paul. This is a wonderful, wonderful hour. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.